Il Presidente. La seduta è aperta.
The sitting is open.
L'ordine del giorno.
On our agenda, we will have the statement by the President of the Commission on the State of the Union. And without any further ado, I shall give the floor to the President of the Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker.
Monsieur le Président,
President, President in Office of the Council, honourable members, good morning. Sometimes history moves discreetly with careful steps. When we're talking about the work of a commission, which only has a 5-year period to make some substantial change, over such a short period of time, you can't bring about a sea change in the state of affairs. The current Commission, like its predecessors, is an episode, a brief moment in time in the long history of the European Union. Our time has not yet come in our Commission, so I'm not yet going to take stock before you of everything we've done over the last 4 years. On the contrary, I will tell you that work will continue over the coming months to ensure that our imperfect European Union becomes a little more perfect every day. We still have things to do, which is what I wish to discuss with you this morning. No satisfaction, modesty, judging by our results. That's the approach of our Commission as we look at our agenda over the coming months. Sometimes history, in the true sense of the word, thrusts itself into the life of nations without any prior warning. That's what happened at the time of World War I. In 1914, it caught the continent off guard. It was a sunny, calm, optimistic year in 1913. In 1913, Europeans were expecting to live through a lasting peace. And yet, a fratricidal war descended on Europe the next year. I'm referring to that period not just because, or rather not because I'm suggesting that we're on the verge of a similar catastrophe in Europe. The European Union is a guarantee of peace. Let's be happy that we live on a continent of peace. A continent which enjoys peace thanks to the European Union.
respectons donc.
So let us show more respect to the European Union. Let us not sully its image. Let us defend our way of life, our way of being. let's embrace a type of patriotism that's not directed against others. And let us decry knee-jerk nationalism which attacks others and seeks scapegoats rather than looking for solutions which will allow us to coexist better.
Le pacte fondateur de l'Union européenne.
The founding principle of the Union, no more war, never again. This informs our lives and those of everyone around us. What is the state of the Union today, in 2018? Europe has very much got past the economic and financial crisis, which hit us coming from elsewhere and had a very brutal impact on us. Europe, as said by the Lehman Brothers, we've had nearly 12 million jobs created since 2014. The economy is growing. That's more than the number of people living in Belgium. Never have we had so many people, 239 million men and women at work in Europe. Youth unemployment stands at 14.8%. That figure is still too high, but it's the lowest level since 2000. Investment has come back to Europe, thanks in particular to the European Fund for Strategic Investment, which some, fewer and fewer, are calling the Juncker Plan. That has generated 235 billion worth of public and private investment, and we're on target for 400 billions worth. And then in Greece, after years, which, it must be said, were painful years, following unprecedented social problems, Greece has made a success of its programme and is back on its feet. I pay homage once again to the Herculean efforts of the Greek people, an effort that others in Europe have still not acknowledged sufficiently.
J'ai toujours défendu.
I have always, as you know, defended Greece, its dignity, its role in Europe, and in particular its continued membership of the Eurozone, and I'm still proud of that. Europe has also reasserted its trade position. It's a global trade power. This is proof, if ever there was, of the need to pool sovereignty. The European Union today has trade agreements with 70 countries. Taken together, we account for 40% of world GDP. The trade agreements I'm talking about have very often been called into question, wrongly. They enable us to export high European food safety standards around the world, as well as workers' rights, environmental standards, and consumer law standards. When last July, during a dangerous period of international tension, I visited both Beijing and Tokyo as well as Washington in 1 week, I was able to speak in my capacity as President of the Commission on behalf of the largest single market in the world, on behalf of a union which accounts for 1/5 of the total world economy, a union which is prepared to defend its values and its interests. I represented Europe as an open continent, but not one that we will hand over. I was able to set out our position in detail and in principle, and I was able to achieve palpable results for our citizens and our firms. When we are united, we Europeans, as a union, have become a force to be reckoned with that you cannot do without. Some in Europe were unhappy with the agreement I reached with President Trump. Some were surprised by it, but there shouldn't have been a surprise. Whenever Europe speaks as one, we can impose our position on others. Where necessary, Europe must act as one. We demonstrated this with our ceaseless efforts to defend the Paris Climate Agreement. We, as Europeans, want to leave a cleaner planet to coming generations. I agree with our Energy Commissioner's analysis of the CO2 emission cuts for 2030. They're scientifically right and politically necessary. The terrible events of this summer have brought home, not just to farmers, the importance of our efforts to safeguard the future for coming generations. Now, of course, you may choose to ignore the climate challenge and look the other way. We in the Commission and you in Parliament must look towards the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the clock is still ticking. The world is ever more volatile. The challenges before our continent are growing day after day, and so we cannot ease up in our efforts, even for 1 second, as we seek to build a more united and stronger Europe. Europe can export its stability, as we did with our successive enlargements. As far as I'm concerned, those enlargements have been and remain success stories because we've managed to bring together European geography and history. But efforts still remain to be made. We need a forthright definition of our attitude towards the accession of Western Balkan countries. Otherwise, others will take it upon themselves to shape our immediate neighbourhood. Let us look around us and see what's happening at this time in Syria, in Idlib. The course of events should be a source of great immediate concern to us all. We cannot remain silent in the face of an impending humanitarian disaster, which is a disaster foretold. The Syrian conflict shows us how the international order, which Europeans have taken advantage of since World War II, has increasingly been called into question. Furthermore, in today's world, Europe can no longer rest assured that the commitments entered into in the past will still be respected in the future. Yesterday's alliances may no longer be tomorrow's alliances. As I was saying, today's world needs a strong, united Europe. A Europe working for peace, trade agreements, stable monetary arrangements, even if others elsewhere are all too inclined to resort to commercial or monetary warfare. I don't like that mercantilism which acts with no regard for others' interests. I remain a convinced multilateralist. If Europe better realizes its political power, its economic power, and sometimes it's the military power of its competitor nations, we will no longer have to be the global pay a loan, although we are still willing to pay.
But we have to be global players too. C'est la raison pour laquelle, en dépit d'une forte résistance.
That's why, despite strong resistance at the time, as of 2014, I relaunched the European Defence Union. That's why, in the coming months, the Commission will continue its work on the European Defence Fund and permanent structured cooperation in defence to make them fully operational. I should add a point of detail which I think is rather important in this context. We will not be militarising the European Union. What we're seeking is greater responsibility and independence, because only a strong, united Europe will be in a position to defend our citizens from internal and external threats, be it terrorism or climate change. Only a strong, united Europe can save jobs in an open, interconnected world. Only a strong, united Europe will make it possible for us to rise to the challenge of global digitalisation. We Europeans, because we are the largest market in the world, will be able to set standards, data, climate standards, while upholding our citizens' conditions of life, provided we are united. A strong, united Europe will allow its member states to reach for the stars. Thanks to our Galileo programme, Europe is still in the space race. No single member state would have been able to launch the satellites that 400 million users around the world are already benefiting from. No member state could have done it on its own. Galileo is a success story. Primarily a European success story. Without Europe, there would be no Galileo. Let's be proud of that. President, Geopolitics tells us that the sounding for Europe's sovereignty. Europe has to embrace its destiny. Europe has a capacity to influence world affairs. Europe must increasingly be a sovereign player in international relations.
La souveraineté européenne.
European sovereignty derives from the national sovereignty of our member states. It does not replace what properly lies within the national purview. By pooling sovereignty where necessary, we strengthen all our component nations and regions. That's part and parcel of belonging to the European Union. European sovereignty will never be directed against others. Europe must remain a tolerant, open continent and will remain so. Europe will never become a fortress turning its back on the world, in particular the suffering part of the world. Europe must and will remain a multilateral continent because the world belongs to everyone, not just the few.
Tel est aussi l'enjeu des élections au Parlement européen.
And that's what's at stake in the European elections in May 2019. In the 250 days between now and then, we must get across to our citizens the evidence that when we act together, the European Union can achieve results, and it respects the commitments we entered into at the beginning of our period of office. Between now and the European elections, we must show that Europe is able to overcome differences between the North and the South, the East and the West. The European Union, Europe, is too small to split itself into 2 today and 4 tomorrow. We have to show clearly that together, East, West, South and North, we're able to plant the seeds of a more sovereign Europe. President, distinguished members, in May 2019, there will be elections. The citizens of Europe won't be interested in what the Commission is proposing, but it will interest them that companies pay their taxes where they make their profits. Voters want a lot from you, not all of you. I know the voters want to know that the Commission proposal will rapidly become a reality. Those who want that are right. If Europeans in 2019, if they won't be they'll be interested in what the Commission does on plastics. If the Europeans, if we want to convince them, we need a European law which cements the ban on plastics. We all declare in fine speeches that we want to be more ambitious in big issues and less ambitious in smaller things. In May 2019, the Europeans won't applaud if twice a year we have to continue to change the clocks twice a year. We need to change this business of changing the clocks. The member states, based on subsidiarity, should decide whether their citizens should live in summer or winter time. We expect that Council and Parliament say this in the same way, and will make sure that regional single market conform solutions will be found. Time is pressing. In the months ahead, we should work closer together so what we promised in 2014 can be delivered in good time before the European elections. When we started, we all promised to deliver in a digital single market, a better monetary union, a banking union, a fair single market, an energy policy, a comprehensive migration policy, a union of safety and security. At least most of us undertook that the social dimension of Europe shouldn't be in second place. It should be treated more seriously. The Commission, all the initiatives that we announced in the Commission in 2014 were put on the table. Half of them were already adopted by Council and Parliament. 20% are well advanced, and 30% are stuck in some difficult negotiations. I don't accept that the Commission is responsible for all the faults itself. Of course, there have been shortcomings. Our proposals are well known. In particular, when it comes to refugees and migration, they should be adopted and implemented. I won't allow in future, I know this will happen, that the Commission is made the sole scapegoat. Scapegoats exist in all institutions, at least of them in the Commission and the Parliament. Leadership broad front is needed to being a security union. The Europeans expect, quite rightly, the European protects them. So the Commission is proposing new rules today to counter terrorist propaganda. And